Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kate Coscarelli from the New Jersey State Bar Foundation. We're so grateful that you've all made some time in your morning to learn about some important issues that are facing all of us, our students, our children, our colleagues, our friends, our neighbors. I think we can all agree that sexting, cyberbullying, this is a huge issue facing a lot of us in the community right now. I'm just going to give a couple of moments while everybody gets situated. As I said, I'm Kate Coscarelli. I'm with the New Jersey State Bar Foundation. We have a terrific panel lined up for you today. We're going to be monitoring the chat throughout. So if you have questions, please feel free to pop them in there. And I will answer the questions that I can right away, and we'll hold some themes and some questions to the end to make sure that we have those for our panelists to get their expertise to weigh in. Now, I'm not going to wait any longer because we have a lot of fantastic material for you today. Again, thank you for joining us. The New Jersey State Bar Foundation, it's part of its mission is helping members of the public and our students in particular understand the role of civics, understand the law, and these AI issues are just at the cutting edge right now. So it's such a great thing that you've made time to be a part of this today. So I'm going to turn it over now to Kimberly Yonta. Kim is a former president of the New Jersey State Bar Association. She is also a criminal defense attorney, formerly an assistant prosecutor who did a lot of appellate work. So she is in a perfect position to lead our conversation today.
How do you change it to?
Oh, and just as a reminder, if for some reason you are jumping in, please make sure you are always on mute. We will help with that, but just as a gentle and friendly reminder. All right, Kim, thank you so much. Take it away.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you today. We're doing our sexting, texting, and cyberbullying and social media update. We presented this on a different type of level up in 2021, and we had such a great response that we updated, and we're calling this our 2.0 version. We got a little bit more material. We have, fake and the AI and all that stuff that all of you are dealing with as parents, teachers, educators, lawyers. I know there are some lawyers on here too who deal with this stuff regularly. So we're really happy. We have a great panel for you. Just as a short introduction, first we have Felicia Farber, who is an author of one of my favorite teen books, and I had both of my own daughters read it who are teenagers. Felicia is a lawyer herself, and she has written what I have read is Ice Queen, and she has a sequel called Fake Out coming out next month. So Felicia and I are going to do an interview about some of the issues that she discusses in her book, which you may all want to take a read and maybe consider having your own children read it. It really deals with a lot of these topics that we're dealing with on their level and why it could be interesting for them and certainly something where they need to learn about their safety. We also have with us today, we have Karen Painter Randall, who is partner at Connell Foley, chair of the Cybersecurity, Data Privacy, and Incident Response Group. Karen is actually at a conference in Arizona right now, so she is joining us very early in the morning from her hotel room, and we thank you for being with us, Karen. We have Michael Kaelber, who is a lawyer at New Jersey NJSBF. He coordinates the continuing legal education and research for Legal One, and that's the Superintendents and Principals Association, for those of you who don't know what that acronym stands for. So Michael will be discussing with us a lot of the things that the committees have been talking about throughout the state, and what the newest issues are on the topics coming from some of these situations for principals and superintendents. And we also have, last but not least, certainly, someone who is very knowledgeable on this subject and someone who I have gone to for information in the past, and that is Stuart Green, Associate Director of Overlook Family Medicine Residency Program at Overlook Medical Center. Stuart is also founder and director of the New Jersey Coalition for Bullying Awareness and Prevention. He founded this organization in 2000 in response to the bullying-related tragedy at Columbine. We all know that this type of bullying has escalated now. So today we are dealing with the cyberbullying issue. We're happy to have everyone with us. So let's start with Felicia. Felicia, and your book, Ice Queen. I'd like to talk to you about it because there are many people that are joining with us again from 2021 who heard us talk about the book, and you gave some freebies away. But let's talk a little bit about that. Can you talk about the theme of your story in Ice Queen and why you thought that it was something that you had to bring forward in this book?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. So happy to be here today. Thank you for joining us. This is Ice Queen, if you haven't seen it yet. And just trying to hold it up to the camera a bit. So Ice Queen is a true-to-life cautionary tale about how easily unsuspecting, ill-informed kids can find themselves on the wrong side of the law. This happens, unfortunately, all the time in real life when kids use their cell phones and computers for what's become normal adolescent behavior. The reality is that teens and tweens live their lives online, and there are a lot of risks and dangers that they're not aware of or that they don't even think about. Ice Queen spotlights some of the common real-life ways that ordinary teens can find themselves in legal trouble. Essentially, I took the classic story of high school outcast versus mean girl, and I moved it into our digital age. So the main characters are Blair and David. They're high school students who find themselves in the middle of a sexting scandal. And even though they both think they're innocent and they didn't do anything wrong, it wreaks havoc on their lives. Blair ends up in a cyber war with the class mean girl, the Ice Queen, and she's relentlessly bullied by her and her circle of friends. The scenarios that I portray in my story can happen to any teenager, and they show how easily teenagers can be, can face criminal consequences for their digital behavior. So basically, we live in a world where technology is surging forward at a lightning pace, and our laws just can't keep up. So we need to make children of all ages aware of the potential consequences of their electronic activities so they don't suffer severe emotional, social, and legal harm. All right, I would like to read for you an excerpt from Ice Queen. This is short, but I'm just going to give you an idea of how I wrote this book. I'm going to read to you just a drop from a scene where my main character, Blair, is arrested for sexting, and she doesn't know why. All right. Uncle Marv is my dad's best friend from law school, and my older brother, Brett, and I have always known him as our jolly, fun, wisecracking honorary uncle. So it's super weird that he's now here as my lawyer. He wastes no time setting his briefcase on the table and sliding up a chair. Sorry. Okay. He directs his focus at me and gets right down to business. I just learned why you were arrested. It seems the charges against you stem from a relatively new crime known as sexting. Sexting, my mom repeats in a shrill voice. What's that? My brand new defense attorney clears his throat and raises his eyebrows. Sexting is when people, typically teenage girls, send sexually explicit material over their cell phones, tablets, or computers. Usually they send nude or partially nude photos of themselves, and since they're minors, it's considered by law enforcement to be child pornography. More charges get tacked on when they transmit the sexual material to other minors. I almost fall off my chair. Nude photos? I've never taken any nude photos. With that declaration, Uncle Marv spins towards the detective. I need a few minutes alone with my client now. Once the detective steps out, Uncle Marv grows more serious, his normal congenial demeanor turning dour. Blair, tell me the truth. There's an attorney-client privilege that now exists between us, which means that anything you tell me is confidential. If I'm going to represent you, I need to know that you're telling me the truth. You have to tell me everything you've done on your cell phone, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, and any other social networking sites you've been on. I need to know about emails, instant and direct messaging, everything. I hinge forward. I know my face must reflect the frustration I feel, hoping he can see my sincerity. But I haven't done anything, so I have nothing to tell you. Uncle Marv narrows his gaze at my statement of innocence. You have no idea how much trouble you're in, sweetie. I don't think you realize how serious this is. If you get convicted on all of the felony counts against you, creation, distribution, exhibition, and possession of child pornography, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, you could go to jail for the next 30 years and be registered as a sex offender for the rest of your life. You'll be getting your GED and taking college courses from prison. You'll be getting out when your friends are having grandchildren. Stunned into silence, I stare at him as though he's just announced the end of the world. In fact, he's announced the end of my world. All I can do is shake my head. My mother's complexion is drained to a pasty white. She grasps Uncle Marv's forearm and says, "Are you telling us that if she posted a nude picture of herself on the internet, then she's going to be prosecuted the same way as a rapist?" "I didn't post any nude pictures," I wail. "Let Uncle Marv answer," she chides. He continues, "Unfortunately, this is a nationwide problem that state legislatures across the country are grappling with." "So the answer is yes," my mom shrieks. "She's going to be prosecuted like a rapist?" Uncle Marv covers his hand with her hand with his and speaks with a slow, confident tone. "No, she's not being accused of rape. The charges are for child pornography. Yes, they are sex crimes, but they don't rise to the level of rape. And the good news is that there are pending bills in the Assembly and Senate to decriminalize sexting done by teens so they can avoid prosecution." This time my dad breaks in. "But you just said pending bills. How does that help Blair?" "This is ridiculous," I holler, jumping to my feet. "I am not a child pornographer. Why am I being accused of this?" "Let Uncle Marv talk," my mother snaps, "and sit back down." Uncle Marv rubs his fleshy temples and adjusts his glasses. "The good news is that most legislators are recognizing that these teens aren't really child pornographers. They're just kids who need some education and counseling about what they're doing and why they're doing it. The bad news is that right now, these teens are still being charged with criminal offenses, some under federal law." My mom turns to Uncle Marv, her face crinkled in bewilderment. "How can this happen in our country? Teenagers who don't fully understand what they're doing, acting like typical adolescents, being prosecuted for adult sex crimes? Why isn't there a huge outcry about this?" "Because it's still under the public radar. Most people don't know this is happening. School administrators want to keep it quiet. Parents quickly cut deals to make it go away. Policymakers are working hard to change it. And by the way, it's not just a problem in our country. Now that technology has exploded, every country has to deal with it." My dad takes this all in, leans back in his chair, and speaks in a low whisper. "Marv, what exactly is it that they have on her? I know my daughter, and she's telling the truth." "Thank you, Dad." Slowly, without another word, Uncle Marv fishes a manila folder from his briefcase, slides it across the table, and fastens his gaze on me. Fingers trembling, I flip up the cover. There are sharp gasps from my parents and me as we view the large, grainy photo.
I remember that section of the book, Felicia, and as a criminal defense lawyer, it struck me how the laws are so intense versus how young our kids are, and why the law is just not in tune with the technology that's out there. I am going to reconnect to my alternative network because I know that there's people saying that they can't hear me. So I'd just like you to tell us a little bit about sexting and how prevalent it is, and why it's become a major issue in our country for our teens, if you don't mind. And I'm going to reconnect and it's going to go smoothly.
Okay, so while you do that, I'll talk about sexting, which is sending or receiving sexually explicit material through cell phones or any type of electronic device. It covers nude or partially nude images and videos and suggestive or explicit language like sexy talk. Sexting is far more common than you might think. In a recent nationwide study, over 80% of respondents from age 18 to 82, believe it or not, admitted to sexting in the prior year, and 88% had said they sexted at least once in their lives. When it comes to teens, 95% report that they have a smartphone or access to one, and over half have engaged in sexting. That's them admitting to it. Since adolescents make up 13% of our population, which is around 42 million people, there's a lot of sexting going on. Kids also have cell phones at very young ages now. The average age of the first cell phone is 10. And within a couple of years, over 2/3 of 12-year-olds have smartphones. The results of a nationwide study of almost 5,000 high school and middle school students shows that over 10% of 12 to 14-year-olds had sent a sext, and over 18% of 15 to 17-year-olds had sent a sext. 17.5% were asked for explicit images for themselves, and over 23% had received them. The statistics make it clear that sexting is a reflection of the changing realities of our human behavior. And for adolescents, part of their sexual exploration and curiosity has moved online into digital media. All right, is Kim back? I'm not seeing her.
Not yet, Felicia, but she will be shortly.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on and talk a little bit more about why it's become such a major issue in our country, especially for teens. So when it comes to electronic behaviors, like Kim mentioned, our laws are outdated, they're non-existent, they're inconsistent, and right now teenagers that sext with each other, even consensually, can be treated under our laws like child pornographers and subject to criminal prosecution. Any sexual image of a minor is considered to be child pornography. What's happening is that the same laws that are intended to target adult sexual predators and protect children from exploitation end up scooping up our adolescents. Children caught sexting can be charged with child pornography, face severe penalties like jail time, and be required to register as sex offenders under Megan's Law in New Jersey. So to break it down into the simplest terms, a teen who takes a sexually suggested or explicit picture can be charged with creating child pornography. A teen who sends or shares that picture can be charged with distributing child pornography. A teen who receives the picture can be charged with possession of child pornography. In New Jersey, it's illegal just to view the sext of a minor. One of the primary reasons I wrote this story is because I feel strongly that teen sexting is not child pornography, and our teens shouldn't be prosecuted as child pornographers for what's become ordinary teen behavior. Unfortunately, in the US, when it comes to sexting, we have not advanced to the point where we have a uniform cultural understanding of what constitutes a crime and why. So it's critical now to educate and protect our teens. All right, I'm looking, is Kim back yet?
Not
Not
yet,
Okay,
Felicia.
I
So
still
do you
don't see
wanna,
her.
do you wanna plow forward with
Yeah, so
okay.
I'll keep talking about the themes in my book. One of the main themes in Ice Queen is revenge porn. It's a form of cyber sexual harassment, also known as non-consensual pornography and image-based sexual abuse. And what it is publishing someone else's sexual images without their consent, where you, the person who has your images depicted, had a reasonable expectation of privacy. It's a growing form of digital sexual violence. And it's not only used for revenge, which is to hurt or embarrass somebody, but it can also be used for bragging, arousal, blackmail, profit, and entertainment. According to a recent Cyber Civil Rights Initiative study, About 13% of all participants, which is almost 1 out of every 8 adults, reported having been the victim of non-consensual pornography, and women were 1.7 times more likely to be targeted than men. What I find especially disturbing about that is many times when the personal images were created, it was with the consent of a partner in an intimate romantic relationship. Another big problem that you may have heard about is called sextortion. Someone has a sexual image of you and they blackmail you with it. They tell you that if you don't want them to send it to everybody you know, then you better give them more graphic sexual images of you, or perform sexual favors, or pay them money. And believe it or not, sextortion has become a big problem starting in middle school. So keep in mind that all of these acts of non-consensual pornography can lead to social anxiety, depression, isolation, and harm the relationships of the victim with the people in their lives. Another big theme in my book is cyberbullying. And cyberbullying is the electronic cousin of bullying. It's basically bullying that's moved online. And examples are sending online threats, hurtful posts, offensive jokes, verbal abuse, compromising pictures and videos, disparaging comments. It could also be malicious or threatening emails, public shaming through mass emails, sharing embarrassing or manipulated images or videos of someone. We're going to get into that deep fakes shortly. Sometimes cyberbullying can be more subtle behaviors and indirect forms of aggression, like spreading lies or rumors and gossiping on social network sites. What's important to keep in mind with cyberbullying is that these are not one-time occurrences. Cyberbullying is repeatedly and intentionally harassing, mistreating, or making fun of someone through electronic devices, wherever people can share or view their content. There is a recent cyberbullying research survey of almost 5,000 middle and high school students, and about 37% of them from 12 to 17 said they've experienced cyberbullying. That is really high, and it might even be more. Interestingly, with that statistic, only 15% of students admitted to cyberbullying others at some point in their lives. So, cyberbullying has the potential to be much worse for the victim than traditional face-to-face harassing or intimidating, because the effects can be more harmful and longer lasting. And sadly, it's led to a number of incidents of teenage suicide. Right here in New Jersey, we've lost Tyler Clementi at 18, 12-year-old Mallory Grossman, and 14-year-old Adriana Kutch. I'm looking for Kim.
Yeah, so Felicia, this is Kate. I'm just going to jump in. I know what you're on the verge of releasing Fake Out. So in your new book, it's coming out right on May 15th. So I think
Yes.
just a few weeks away. The plot there also deals with cyberbullying, but on a bigger, more high-tech scale through the use of AI. So can you tell us a little bit about your new book?
Yes, of course, thanks.
Great.
So Fake Out is a romantic mystery novel featuring the same main characters in Ice Queen, Blair Evans and David Woods, and they're trying to have a normal senior year and enjoy their new relationship when manipulated media and deepfakes are used to break them up. I'm going to give you my Barnes & Noble summary here. Someone is manipulating images of David to make it look like he's engaging in illegal acts and spreading them all over social media. Since the images seem real, he gets in trouble with the school and faces suspension. But when a sexually graphic video of him with his girlfriend, the Ice Queen, is circulated, no one believes it's a fake, especially not Blair. She desperately wants to trust David, but she's seen the evidence with her own eyes and heard it with her own ears. The school has no tolerance for David's indiscretions and increases his punishment to expulsion. Blair has to figure out if their whole relationship is built on lies or if David is really telling the truth. And it's a deep fake like he claims. And if it is a deep fake, then who is trying to destroy his life and why. All right, I would like to play for you my book trailer. It is short, I promise, and I'm going to share my screen. So bear with me one moment while I do that.
New technology is emerging at a rapid pace, and we're now seeing more and more applications of artificial intelligence. But what happens if artificial intelligence is used against us? High school students Blair and David learned that consequences can be catastrophic. It's hard enough to be a teenager these days, contending with bullying in school, cyberbullying online, and plus all the pressures to do well in school, to perfect the image on social media. But now there are new things to worry about, such as deepfakes. A deepfake is when someone creates an image or video that replaces a person's likeness with that of another. Their manipulated videos are very sophisticated and make the edited images sound appear to be real. In other words, with this technology, someone can take your voice and body and do whatever they want with it. Fake Out is a story about the ultimate cyberbullying with deepfakes. If you want to know what happens to David and Blair, then put Fake Out on your must-read list.
Okay.
That's great, Felicia. Hopefully I'm coming through a little bit better right now. But I'm looking forward to this book because, you know, it's something that I deal with on a regular basis with parents calling about situations in school that lead their children into being arrested and brought into the police department on a regular basis. And it's something I don't think our kids are really in touch with as much as they probably should be. So what would you say? I know we're going to talk a lot about that today with regards to the laws. But what would you say, what has been the response to your book, Ice Queen, as a result of some of these issues that we face legally?
Yeah, I've had a great response to Ice Queen, and my beta readers loved Fake Out so much. And, you know, we're very excited when, sadly, the things that were in my book came out in real life. So I wrote the book, the next one, the sequel, over 2 years ago, and many of the things that are in my book are coming true right now. We are facing an unprecedented crisis of fake news, information, and misinformation and disinformation. So the average person can now get their hands on cutting-edge tools that can alter photos and videos. They're two of our most powerful forms of communication. And it's become easy. You don't need much skill, and it doesn't cost very much. And software, apps, and AI are used to produce crude products that were simple to spot. But now generative AI can manipulate pictures, sound, and video to create synthetic media and fake videos called deepfakes, which are high quality and look insanely real. So they can be used to imitate the voices and appearances of real people and make them do, like in my video, whatever they want. And our younger generations are especially susceptible to the dangerous ramifications of this new technology. And it's up to all of us to help them.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Have you heard from teen and adults and what they think that they should know, or what you think they should know before they pick up their phones or go online?
Yeah, that's a question that I get asked a lot. People who read my book say to me, you know, I didn't know that. And we're talking from 9 to adults. Believe it or not, I have a big following from grandparents. They think it's really important for their grandchildren to read my book. And I think that anyone who is a parent or teacher who's responsible for the welfare of children needs to educate themselves so they can make children aware of the safety precautions they need to take when they're texting, posting, tweeting, using apps, and gaming. We can't just assume that our adolescents know about safe technology and proper online behavior. They need to be taught the same way we teach them about bike safety or going in the mall and avoiding strangers. There are online hazards they need to be aware of and responsible ways to act. So even if you're someone who doesn't understand technology at all, you can still stay informed like you're doing today by attending this program. You can teach kids about treating others with dignity and respect, both online and in person. Teach them they have the right to say no. If someone is pressuring them for a nude photo or wants them to do something online that they're not comfortable with, tell them to follow their instincts and refuse. They also need to be taught the long-term consequences to their cyber activities. They can do risky things, but if they behave badly or make mistakes online, it doesn't go away and there's a permanent record. And I think another important thing that everyone needs to be aware of is that cyberbullying can damage the online and in-person reputations of everyone that's involved. It's not just the victim. Bullies can end up with bad online reputations also. And that can follow them for a long time and cost them school admissions, jobs, and relationships. So it's important to give young folks the right information at home and to reinforce it in the classrooms.
Absolutely. Now, before we get to our first poll question for our audience, I think you have some slides that you wanted to go through.
I do. Do you want to do the poll? Why don't we do the poll question?
I want to do the poll first. That's fine. All right. What's our first poll? I don't want to say the question before we put it up. There we go. Has anyone you know been the subject of cyberbullying? That should be. And of course, we have major yeses, major response for yeses. And, I think, Felicia, sometimes, cyberbullying is such a broad term that, we're seeing like an 80-20 variation here right now, that it's something that, could be very broad or could be very specific. And so sometimes I think people don't realize that they might be cyberbullied, and they are.
Yeah, I think that's true too. That's part of the educational process, is so that kids especially can understand what is normal and what's not acceptable. So our panel is going to delve into this topic also further. So these are interesting statistics. Thank you for everybody.
Let's do one more poll for the next question, I think, because that's also pertinent to what we're doing right now. The next one is, I believe, has anyone you know been the subject of sexting?
It was hard to hear you, so it's sexting. And
has anyone you know been the subject of sexting?
Thank you. So several years ago, the answer to this poll wasn't that high. I expect it's going to be higher today. And looking at the numbers coming in, it's about a 70-30 split.
Yes.
Yeah, much higher than last time because it has become so prevalent. Okay,
Yeah.
looks like everybody. Thank you all for your responses. All right, I have a PowerPoint now that I'm going to run through. And I'm going to share my screen. There's a lot
Felicia, this is Kate. I'm just going to jump in and be the voice over everybody, and just let everyone know we're going to turn off everybody's video who is not a presenter, because I think that will help preserve the bandwidth for our presenters. So it's not personal. We're just trying to make this experience as best as possible for all of you. So just a quick heads up, if you see your beautiful face disappear, that it's for the sake of technology. Thank you. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Felicia. I'm wondering if my audio is better. I'm turning my video off too to see if that helps.
Okay.
Much better.
Really? Okay. All right.
All right, we ready to go? I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So you should see my main screen up here for today's program. This presentation is going to be a good backdrop for the issues our panel is discussing today and give you a look at some of the laws that pertain to these topics. Okay. We're going to start off with the developing teenage brain because there's a biological reason why adolescents are less likely to think before they act and don't stop to consider the consequences of their actions. It's because when children become teenagers, there are dramatic changes that are taking place in their brain that affect their thinking and their behavior. There's this kind of remodeling that's going on where the unused connections in the gray matter, the thinking and processing part of the brain, are pruned away. And this pruning process begins at the back of the brain, and the prefrontal cortex in the front of the brain is remodeled last. So the prefrontal cortex is responsible for the executive functions of the brain that control decision-making and reasoning and help us understand the consequences of our actions, plan for the future, solve problems, and control impulses. So this back to front development explains why tweens and teens thinking and behavior can be so illogical, impulsive, and emotional. They're working with brains that are still under construction, and the structural development of the prefrontal cortex doesn't finish until well into adulthood at around age 25. And while it's still developing, teenagers are relying on another small part of the brain called the amygdala to make their decisions and solve problems. And not surprisingly, the amygdala is associated with emotions, impulses, aggression, immediate reactions, and instinctive behavior. So these physiological reasons explain why adolescents take more risks, make impulsive decisions, get into fights, and express powerful emotions. We have 27 states in the US that have sexting laws, although there's no uniformity of these laws among the states. Many have mandatory reporting also that require educators to report sexting to police. There's also no federal law that specifically addresses sexting, although it can be a crime under federal child pornography laws if it does involve a minor. As of October 23, almost all states make it illegal to disseminate non-consensual porn or image-based sex abuse material. 48 states, DC, Puerto Rico, Guam. The only two states without a revenge porn law are Massachusetts and South Carolina. There is federal legislation outlawing non-consensual pornography, but what we do have are federal statutes allowing victims to bring civil actions. So under 15 United States Code 6851, it's the first federal law that we have targeting non-consensual pornography or revenge porn. It covers both adults and children if their visual images were disclosed without their consent through interstate or foreign commerce, which is the internet. They can bring civil actions in district court and can recover actual or liquidated damages in an amount of $150,000 per image. And they can also get injunctions ordering the defendants to take down or stop disclosing the image. If someone was a minor while they were victimized, they can seek civil remedies for personal injuries under Federal Statute 18, U.S. Code Section 225. And this statute deems whoever the victim is to have sustained damages of no less than $150,000 plus attorney's fees, the cost of the legal action, and there's no statute of limitations on that. They can bring it any time. I put in Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act here because that basically gives immunity for online computer services with respect to their third-party content that's generated by users. What does that mean? It means that social media giants like Meta, X, Google, who owns YouTube and Snapchat, they have no accountability for the content posted on their sites since they did not create or develop them. Under sexting legislation in 2018, school districts in New Jersey have to provide instruction on the social, emotional, and legal consequences of sexting one time during middle school. In my opinion, it's a good start, but it's something that should be taught and reinforced every year in middle school and high school. Here's some sexting behaviors that are criminal. Revenge porn, which we've covered in New Jersey, that falls under invasion of privacy law, crime of the third degree, endangering the welfare of a child. That's conduct that causes harm to a child, and it's an indictable criminal offense. That could be depicting a child engaging in a prohibited sexual act or portraying them in a sexually suggestive manner. Lewdness is New Jersey's indecent exposure statute, can be a disorderly persons offense or a fourth degree crime. Child enticement, doing something as simple as asking a minor for nude photos can constitute luring or enticing a child. Child pornography, we have covered in New Jersey. It's contained in the endangering welfare of a child statute. If it's a child pornography crime, then it can be punishable by $150,000 fine or 5 to 10 years in prison. In New Jersey, it's illegal to possess, view, distribute, share, receive photographs that depict minors in sexual acts.
Felicia, just on that point, because this is something that comes up in my practice all the time, and that is when juveniles might take a picture of themselves, even in their underwear and bra, and send that. And that came up in your book too.
Yes.
And I say that because a lot of people don't even realize that. They might think that you look like you're in a bathing suit or something, and it's not, it's underwear. That can be considered pornography. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you for clarifying that, because it covers sexually suggestive material. And at the beginning, I said even sexy talk, language in words, not just images. Okay, New Jersey has a penalty diversion program, and that provides first-time juvenile offenders who are criminally charged with sexting an alternative to prosecution. Instead, they can participate in remedial education or counseling, where they learn about the legal consequences of sexting and the long-term effects that it has. To be eligible for this program, both the creator and the subject of the sexually explicit photo or video have to be juveniles at the time that it was made.
And just so everybody knows, if you are in that diversionary program, the child's that is a dismissal at the conclusion of that type of program. It's still on your child's record, but because it's a dismissal, it's not considered an adjudication at that point.
Thank you. Thank you. We're fortunate we have our criminal defense attorney here as our moderator. Okay, Psychology Today calls bullying an epidemic that's not showing signs of improvement. It's widely considered to be a form of school violence, and over time, it can have traumatic effects. Nearly 14% of public schools report that bullying is a discipline problem occurring daily or at least once a week. The percentage of students who've experienced bullying at school in the last couple of years has been around 22.6 to 25%. That's 1 out of 4, which is really high. Research indicates that bullying and harassment in schools tend to increase during late childhood and peak in early adolescence, especially during middle school. And you can see that is borne out by the statistics. Bullying is highest in middle schools, followed by high schools, combined schools, and primary schools. Where is it occurring, by the way? 39% of students, 12 to 18, say most common locations for being bullied were in the hallways or stairways. 26% said it was the cafeteria, and 20% said it was outside on school grounds. Technology has expanded the reach of bullying and the harm it causes. Traditional bullying and cyberbullying are closely related because those who are bullied at school are bullied online, and those who bully at school bully online. So it's important to learn about cyberbullying because the impact on children can be severe, and they can bring their hurt and humiliation and fear and anxiety into school with them. 68% of children who were cyberbullied experienced mental health issues, increased stress, depression, anxiety, anger, low self-esteem, self-harm, and eating disorders. Adolescents who experience cyberbullying victimization were more than twice as likely to have depressive symptoms and trigger suicidal thoughts. That's according to the Cyberbullying Research Center. There are many risks for kids to be targeted, like being seen as weak or different, having learning or visible disabilities, being depressed or anxious, or having a few friends. Pew Research says 59% of teens who've been bullied or harassed have been bullied or harassed online. And most have experienced that abusive behavior in the form of name calling, false rumors, or receiving physical threats. You can see the rest of the statistics here, so I'm not going to repeat them. Cyberbullying is increasing. Studies have shown a steady increase over time, which is not surprising considering the popularity of social media. This slide shows the results of national surveys of middle and high school students about victimization at school and online bullying in the last 30 days. As you can see, 2007, before we really had social media, 10.4% up to 26.5% today. Very troubling trend. 9 out of 10 tweens, 9 to 12 years old, use social media and gaming apps. Over 93% of teens, that's 37 million in the United States, use social media. The two most popular are YouTube and TikTok. 70% use YouTube daily and 58% use TikTok daily. On this slide, you can see how large the percentages are for those who've been cyberbullied or witnessed cyberbullying. And you're going to get these slides after the program. So, don't worry if I'm going a little fast because we want our panelists to have a chance here. You see Instagram and Snapchat are the two most popular. Oops. All right, there's a lot of different types of media manipulation. You can manipulate language, social media, art, news, content, people. I'm focusing today on the creation of false images that can be used to warp our basic notions of truth. Fake images, fabricated media are things that are used to trick people and spread disinformation. It can be in the form of images, altering photos and videos to deceive, digital manipulation, modifying digital images using software, tools or techniques to manipulate reality and deceive viewers. Can also be used for creative purposes and to create desired visual effects. Those are the good uses of it. Don't want you to think everything that's manipulated is bad. Synthetic media is generated by AI, and that can be used as a tool by everyone from impulsive teens to scammers and criminals. All right, deepfakes are AI-generated images, video, or audio. We first saw them in 2017 on Reddit. And the deep came from deep machine learning, and the fakes, obviously, from false images. It's become a global problem, especially when it comes to identity theft. You can see how fast it's infiltrated our world. The country attacked the most by deepfakes, believe it or not, is Spain. Online media is the industry with the highest identity fraud increase. Over 143,000 new deepfake videos were posted last year. Deepfakes are often used maliciously to spread misinformation or create pornographic material without the consent of the person whose likeness was used. Girls and victims are being sexualized and deepfaked without their knowledge and consent at an unprecedented rate. Look at these statistics. 90 to 95% of online deepfake videos are non-consensual porn, and 90% of them are of females. I want to point out here that boys can also be targets of manipulated media and deepfakes, and I've spotlighted that problem in my new book, Fake Out. 10% of states have criminalized non-consensual deepfake porn. That's New York, Texas, Indiana, Minnesota, Georgia, Hawaii, Virginia, Florida, and South Dakota. Other states like California and Illinois only give victims the ability to sue perpetrators for damages in civil court. We have no federal law for deepfakes, so there's nothing restricting the creation of faked sexual images of real people. But here's what we do have. President Biden signed an executive order last year urging our lawmakers to bar the use of generative AI to produce child sex abuse material or non-consensual pornography, and directed our federal government to issue guidance to label and watermark the AI-generated content so you could help distinguish between authentic material and that made by software. In New Jersey, we have bills that have been proposed to that effect as well, to label and mark anything that's been AI-generated. From the big leading tech giants like Google, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, we have their voluntary pledges to agree to these AI safeguards and Biden's order, and also to ensure that AI products are safe before they are releasing them. All right, in the news, my panelists are going to cover this more, so I'll just touch on this a bit. In October, we had a Westfield High School incident. This is where my beta readers like all texted me, called me, and emailed me like crazy to say what happened in your book. It's happening in real life, which is, like I said, not really what I want to hear. I'd rather have it be just a fictional story. But last summer, teen boys used AI image generators to create and share fake nudes of female classmates. They put their faces on nude bodies and circulated it on Snapchat. In suburban Seattle, a 14-year-old boy created and distributed similar nude AI images of 16 girls and a school official. In Beverly Hills Middle School, 16 eighth graders were involved with fake AI nudes last month, and 5 students were expelled. Earlier this month in London, 9th and 11th graders were targeted, and one 16-year-old victim said, "You want people to believe it's not you. And even if they know it's not you, it's still embarrassing. It's not okay. And people say it's not real, get over it. But I'm humiliated. My parents are humiliated." Taylor Swift brought this to light in January. It drew a huge amount of attention from the public and government officials, which is a good thing. Even though deepfakes have existed for years, once it happened to Taylor Swift, it raised awareness of how prevalent the sexual exploitation and manipulation problem have become. Okay, so this is my book. I am holding a special raffle today for everyone who's attending this program. I'm giving away 3 free copies of Ice Queen. You just have to sign up for my free newsletter at feliciafarber.substack.com on here. The next slide has the same address and a QR code if that's easier for you. Fake Out is coming out next month on May 15th, and I'm also going to have some special promotions and give away free copies of that at my book launch. So if you'd like to get updates and be eligible to win, please just scan the code and sign up, and I'll be announcing the winner of today's Ice Queen raffle in that newsletter. Like I said, you're going to get these slides, which has all of these information resources for you. These sites have a lot of information on all these cyber issues. And that is it. I want to thank you all. I think I probably went longer than I intended. So I'm going to stop screen share.
Thanks, Felicia. We appreciate it. So we're going to move on to our next poll question. Has anyone in the audience been involved in an HIB matter? There it is. So I know we have a lot of teachers and social workers on this in our audience today. So I'm expecting that this yes answer should be high. And it looks like we're getting around close to the 80 percentile. Like an 80-20, it's looking like close to an 80-20. Okay, so we probably have a lot of teachers on and some parents with kids that have been involved in these matters. The next, it looks like it's a 78-22 response. Thank you, everybody. We have some more polls questions for you, but before we do that, I'd like to go into our next speaker, Karen Painter Randall, who is also an attorney who works in this area. Karen, I appreciate you being with us from Arizona. We're going to share those results.
Here, I haven't left. Here I am, Kim.
Okay, there you
It's-
are.
It's
Thanks for
very
joining.
very early here in Arizona, but happy to be part of this important conversation.
Well, we're happy to have you. And one of the things, Felicia talked about, a lot of the laws, the criminal laws, that's what I deal with. The issues that these teens face if they are involved in this. But, I know you deal with best practices and how you advise clients in these situations. So I want you to, go over some of that with us. I know you do have some slides that you did share and you're sharing with everybody as helpful background knowledge, because we don't want to go over, there's so much to go over. We want to kind of get into the nitty gritty of it. So why don't you take us through it?
Yeah, certainly. We did supply a PowerPoint, but Felicia has covered a lot of the demographics that we wanted to address. So as I mentioned earlier, the PowerPoint is going to be available for everyone. It's just another good resource for everyone to have. I'm sure Stuart and Michael will have resources as well, and I certainly encourage everyone to take advantage of those resources. But I want to thank everyone for including me on this very important panel. It's an extremely important topic. I think a lot of people, quite frankly, are frustrated by what's going on with the sexting and the cyberbullying and now the media manipulation. I kind of bring a different perspective to the discussion. I do serve as incident response breach counsel to a lot of organizations who are compromised by a cyber threat group. And one of the first things we do is take a look at what sensitive information may be at risk. It could be, we call it personally identifiable information, something that's very personal, embarrassing information, social security numbers, protected health information, and we make a determination as to whether or not the threat actor gained access to that information. What is alarming is that most of the time, these threat actors will take this sensitive information that Felicia has been talking about, by the way. And it, I always call it garbage in, garbage out with this AI, generative AI. And they post it on the dark web. So it really puts schools at risk. It puts students at risk. It puts, quite frankly, if some of this generative AI is not used appropriately, it can put families at risk. If you have your child in a room not being monitored by you, putting sensitive information out there, through generative AI, through those chat GPTs that everyone is talking about. So what I wanted to do is walk you through a little bit in terms of what AI is, what generative AI is. I'm not going to do a deep dive, certainly on the technology, but then talk about some of the risks, talk about some of the benefits, address best practices, because it's important. If this technology is out there and you don't know what it does or how to properly use it to protect yourselves, your students, your children's information, you really are putting yourself at risk. So January 1, 1983 is a significant date. And that is the birthday of the internet. Imagine what our world was like before 1983. We didn't have the cell phones. We didn't have computer networks communicating with each other. Quite frankly, I think it was a pretty good world. But starting in 1983, this technology really took off. It's still taking off very, very rapidly. AI has been around for a long period of time. You remember the Alexa, hey Siri, and everyone thought it was great until they started to take them and put them in their drawers because they didn't want Alexa and Siri to listen to their conversations. And now you don't have to worry about those devices because you've got your cell phone listening to you all day long. I'm sure you can all nod your head when you talk to, your spouse or to your child or to your colleague at the school, and then a couple minutes later, it pops up about how to take that wonderful vacation that you haven't taken in a while and where you should go. So it is, it is somewhat like Big Brother, but the data at risk is very important. So recently, you've heard about OpenAI with Sam Altman. He's been on and off boards. And then you've heard about OpenAI's development of chatbots. Sometimes they're called ChatGPT. There's Bard, there's Copilot, there's Bing. So again, other technology, other toys that your students can use, that your family can use. And my recommendation is to make sure you have somewhat of a complete understanding as to how to use these new tools. The Chat GPT, the chatbot, it started with Chat GPT 3. And now it has progressed to Chat GPT 4, which is a lot more sophisticated. You can buy services to use it. It works faster. These Chat GPTs are trained. There are actual people who train them. And that's why we're always concerned about bias. Are they being trained in a certain way so that when your child or when the school signs on to Chat GPT and starts prompting with questions, are they going to get a legitimate response, or is it going to be bias? I mean, you have to know that bias can come into play when you use this. There are benefits certainly to the use of this technology. Education, quite frankly, can take advantage of it. It can help with school projects. It can help with lessons. It can accelerate exploration and creativity, updating curricula, research, illustrations of student papers, support with classwork and homework. And that's assuming that everyone uses it the right way. When I say that, whatever, as I mentioned before, it's garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you put into that system stays in. You can't delete it. They can share that information with third parties. So there are concerns with the use of this technology as well. Privacy and security is one of the top concerns that a lot of us have for the reasons I just stated. Whatever you put in, if you have a child or a student using ChatGPT and they don't know how to use it or what the dangers of using it are, they could be sitting there talking about where their family, I'm excited, we're going on vacation. We live in, Bergen County, New Jersey. Someone's taking care of our dog. Or my mother's sick, mentions the mother's name. She's being treated at this hospital. This is, that goes in and it stays, and it can be shared with third parties. So the terms of service for the use of some of these products, don't ignore them. Some of them are very complicated. I know it's hard to look at, try to negotiate with Microsoft. Let me just read you some of the things that are included in the terms of service. It warns you that ChatGPT can hallucinate. I'm sure you've all heard about it. ChatGPT is trained. It scrapes the information from the internet. It tries to suck in as much data as possible, but it's only been trained up to a certain point. So if you ask ChatGPT a question or prompt, and it hasn't been trained within that time period, it's going to it will make something up for you. You may not be happy if you don't verify it. It could be absolutely incorrect. And in the terms of service, it says some situations result in incorrect output that does not accurately reflect real people, places, or facts. You should evaluate the accuracy of any output. So I'm sure you all heard about the attorneys in New York who filed a brief. The court reviewed the brief and found that the citations in the brief, the facts in the brief were incorrect. And when they asked the attorneys the questions, the attorneys indicated that they really didn't know how to use ChatGPT and that they thought it was just a search engine. And they got fined, and there were ethical consequences. So, something to be aware of. It warns you about the security of the information that you put into the system. Again, if the student is putting something in with the prompt, that's going to stay. The system uses it to continue to train, to be more sophisticated, so that when Kim later on prompts the user on what is the best school to use in New Jersey and why, and they and someone has already put the school's name in and talked about the school, it's going to use that information to give a response. So if you want to put in very simple, benign information, something that can't stay within the system and be kicked out later on, that's certainly fine, but it really is important to understand, how this new technology works, what's the proper way to use it, and how to best protect yourself. That's just the privacy and security of it. Certainly, there are other risks to using ChatGPT. For schools, one of the things that they need to be aware of, and I'm sure it's been addressed, if not, it needs to be addressed through a protocol, is plagiarism, cheating, their ethical concerns. I'm sure that if you haven't already considered it, there are policies that you really need to put in place on, whether or not you can use it. And if so, how you can use it, and put the proper training in place, the proper monitoring control in place, so that you can avoid ethical situations like that. Scams, fraud, we spoke about that. With AI, security, privacy, it's going to be placed at risk more and more. That applies to your school, that applies to your students, that applies to your children. AI is now writing the emails that we get on some of these cyber attacks, and they are so sophisticated. Before, it used to be the Nigerian prince, something was misspelled wrong. The grammar was awful, but now they're beautiful emails, and they conduct recon. And then they try to trick you, your child, to give up sensitive, confidential information that later on could result in transfer of funds, or taking that information and propagating a more serious attack against you, your school. Again, the school has to understand this new technology, how to use it. It does rise to the level of the sexting, certainly, and the extortion and the deepfake pornography. The key message is understand the technology and how and when it's to be used. And that gets to the disinformation aspect of the ChatGPT, the deep fakes. Harassment and hate speech comes out of it as well. Bias, I think I mentioned. What's really revealing is that the actual founder of OpenAI, Sam Altman, who's been on and off the board several times, was scared of AI. He actually went, you all recall probably, and testified before Congress about what the ChatGPT does, and he said it scares him. Jeffrey Hinton over at Google, he's considered the godfather of AI. He retired from Google because they were developing AI too quickly without the proper guardrails. And he again said it really frightens him that this is progressing so quickly. People aren't understanding it. They're not understanding the terms, and they're not mitigating the risk of use of this new technology. So there are benefits, but certainly there are risks, and the message is understand what they are, and put proper guardrails in place. So should parents and schools allow their kids to use this new technology? There's not going to be a moratorium. The country's not going to put a hold on it. It's not going to stop developing it. We're competing against China. We're competing against Russia. They want to be one step ahead of us. Putin was known as saying whoever controls AI will dominate the world. So we're in a race. And I think everyone has to understand the new technology and be a part of it. Dive in and learn about the generative AI, the chat GPTs, the other, the bars, the bings, but understand the terms of the use. Learn, if you go on the internet, you can find all sorts of ways to have good prompts that the user can use to get the information that they need. You can find great, there was one gentleman who told me that he used ChatGPT to write a sympathy note. And the person wrote back to him after the service and said, "That was such a lovely note I received from you. And it was probably the best I've ever received in my lifetime. And I will take that note and store it away." He used ChatGPT, but I think going forward, as Kim and Felicia said, maybe those notes need to be watermarked as well, indicating that maybe that ChatGPT was used to do, to write them. Get the family involved to learn it together. There are free courses out there. The school should, jump in and maybe, work with the school community to offer these free courses, or do it under supervision of someone who really understands AI and how to properly use AI to reduce that risk. But get the family involved, train on how to prompt, train as to what type of information can be used, that the information that does not include that personal, confidential, anything that you don't want to be kept within that system. Verify the accuracy of the input. Remember about the hallucinations. It does make mistakes. Ask the system to identify its source. I know attorneys, when they are researching and using the generative AI, they actually ask for the link to the source that was referred to. So they're not writing briefs and providing citations that are inaccurate that the court will sooner or later catch up on. Ethical approach, I've mentioned that before for the schools. You really need to have a school rule in place. You need to have that usage policy in place, and then the monitoring and controls. Keep in mind, it is garbage in, garbage out. I'm just going to really address deepfakes very quickly because I know Felicia did a great job on addressing it. Deepfakes, they're out there. We're seeing them more and more, not just with regard to the sexual exploitation, but deepfakes are being used to trick schools, trick families. Certainly the younger children could be used as pawns in these frauds. There was a case involving a chief financial officer. They were having a Zoom call. The CEO was on the call. The entire board was on the call. Their pictures showed up, like you see, Kim, and some of them were live. And they started to talk about a transaction, and the CEO said, I'd like for you to wire, those millions of dollars, overseas to Hong Kong. And looked like Kim, looked like Felicia, looked like Kate, looked like, Stuart and Michael, and they're all nodding their head. And the CFO relied upon what he saw, what he heard, did not verify, wired the millions of dollars overseas to Hong Kong, and it ended up being a deep fake. It looked like them, the voices sounded like them, but it wasn't. And so, that can happen to a school, that can happen to a family. If the child is involved, feeding that information that a threat actor will use. And, your checkbook is sitting around, teenagers, who knows what teenagers do, but, they are happening. And unfortunately, the pornographic deepfakes are happening as well. And we all hope that as a result of that, Taylor Swift, we were hoping that we're really going to get the legislators moving with some of these bills. I don't know, quite frankly, what the issue is. It's pretty simple, but I think some of the issues may include the fact that the perpetrator can become anonymous very quickly if it's something that's not really related to school and being spoken about. Their First Amendment issues that are always coming up. So as much as it sounds like there should be a simple solution, there are some legal challenges to some of these deep fakes as well. But they are out there. There are some benefits to it, believe it or not. Sometimes they could come up and use an actor's voice if the actor's passed away, or a likeness, and put it in a later movie. The soccer player Beckham had an ad that went out talking about a huge medical issue, and they were able to take his voice and likeness and put it into 9 different foreign languages so that other countries could benefit from the message that he was getting. But as I mentioned before, there's a lot of downsides as well. The threat of extortion, criminal, social engineering scams that I just spoke to you about, threat to privacy, and the list goes on. And with regard to the companies, the example I gave, certainly brand and reputational damages. Felicia's right. No, the states are going to have to use their own laws. New Jersey's there, but it's in a committee still. It was moving along, and then it was dead, and now it's back in committee. So write your legislators, let them know that this is something that's important to you and that you want to see passed. Federal law, she's right. There's no federal law. Same thing as breach notification laws. We all have state laws, but there's no federal uniform law on it. So it's following the same path. Let me just jump forward with regard to how to incorporate best practices. Be educated on the use and creation of deepfake technology. Train. It's just like being ready for a cyber attack, right? We tell people you need to educate, you need to be proactive, you need to understand, you need to train people. It wouldn't be a bad idea to have a training session for all of your students. I mean, let them know how this happens. What technology, I mean, obviously you're running the risk of, educating them to the point that maybe someone wants to try to use it. But I think if they understand the consequences, it may make a difference. Be vigilant. When I say that, there is a way that you can detect deepfakes. We always say, have the person turn their head to the side, and it'll become very, very fuzzy based upon the conversation that you're having. If someone's asking you to wire funds or take action that you normally wouldn't take, you need to make sure that you verify, and you do it in an independent way. You call the organization. You don't do it with the people that are on the video or on the phone. Sometimes it's not video. It could just be a call from a managing partner saying that we've decided to wire funds to another firm, or from a school. I have a case right now where the school fell for a business email compromise or a spoofing email too. And long conversation back and forth in emails, and the school ended up transferring money to a vendor on behalf of itself. It was not the real vendor. The vendor called several weeks later and said, "What happened to my payment?" Never got it. So, verify anything unusual, verify independently, but not through the original source. There is technology that you can use to see if an image or video has been manipulated. If it's available, if the school chooses to use those types of technology, that's a good thing. Other than that, I can say that this new technology is not going away. It's here, and the best thing you can do is to become educated, to monitor. There are controls that you can put in place. That's something that Kim and Felicia, maybe we could add. Maybe Michael and Stuart are going to talk about it. But the parental controls that you can put in place so that you can see what your kids are doing on social media. You can time it out. You can see what they're looking at. I always used to say when my kids were young, I used to say to other parents, snoop. You've got to snoop with this new technology and find out, what your kids are doing, how they're using it, and whether or not they're putting themselves, the school, the family at risk. Again, good things come with it, but risk as well. So I hope you all well, and I hope you do great in this environment without taking on the additional risk, and use the new technology for the benefit of yourselves. I'm always available to answer any questions, but again, thank you for having me on this program.
Karen, quick question. It came up in the chat, and you're talking about privacy and security. So I do want you to address this if you can. I know we're kind of out of time with you, but I do want to, this is important. Cheryl basically said, I attended an AI workshop and teachers admitted using AI to write recommendation letters for students. It bothered me because it wasn't really from the teacher, but their side was that they are busy and it helped write it quickly. What privacy problems do you see for even the student as a result of a teacher doing that?
Well, I mean, I guess it all depends. I mean, great question. I guess it depends on what is in the recommendation. I mean, is it legitimate? Are they putting legitimate information in the recommendation? They're good recommendations and bad reputation and recommendations, and sometimes there's no recommendations. If they're putting the personal information of the student in the recommendation, name, address, telephone number, that's going into ChatGPT, and it's going to stay there. It's not going anywhere. So I think what I would do for privacy and security reasons is, before using ChatGPT to write some of these recommendations, certainly I would let the parents and the child know that there are some, support technology that the school uses. One of them is ChatGPT. That the teacher would like to use it to draft a recommendation that, usually you use it as a support technology, right? So you're not just going to use it, put that personal information in it and send it off. It's supposed to help you, give you a starting point. Take it and then revise it, at your own level before it's sent out. Make sure that you take a look at it to make sure there's no personal information in it. I mean, we on the paper resumes today, the ones that are posted on LinkedIn, we tell people, don't put your address, don't put your telephone number, don't put sensitive information on your resume that you're posting on LinkedIn. That's the type of information that threat actors look at that puts, schools, parents, families at risk. So certainly I would put that into the recommendation, use ChatGPT for it. I would have full disclosure. I would be transparent about it. And I would certainly use that as a starting point to create your own work in sending that recommendation out. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, and I think that, as an attorney, what if these teachers are using it and the schools don't know about it? I think Michael, this is probably a good transition for Mike Kaelber at this point, but certainly I think that the school needs to know whether the teachers are using ChatGPT to do that. And Mike, thank you for joining us on that topic. Before we get to you, Mike, to go into that, I want to do a poll question. Thank you, Karen. What social media platform is most popular with your students or children? Facebook, X, which is Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. And by the way, when we were coming up with this question, there were so many other social media like Discord and so many others that are being used by our kids that we kind of stuck to the main ones just to see what you would all say. Yeah, look at TikTok is in the lead right now at 54%. Isn't that crazy? Okay. So 54% TikTok, 30% Snapchat, 15% Instagram, 0 on Twitter, and 2% on Facebook. It seems about right. Mike Kaelber, thank you for being with us today. I know that you're an attorney for NJPSA, FEA Legal 1. We're happy to have you. And I know I just kind of ambushed you with that question related to what Karen was talking about, but I think it's important. Have you seen any trends for ChatGPT with the schools?
Absolutely. We've done some programming with NJPSA and Legal One on AI in the schools, and it's a fascinating world. The Wild West out there in many ways. I'd like to share a couple of cautionary notes, piggybacking on what Karen said, because she was excellent, as was Felicia. But one of the things for our educators out there, I'm going to quote Sergeant Phil Oosterhouse from the old Hill Street Blues TV program, which means I'm really old. Used to end the Shape Up session in the morning with, "Let's be careful out there." And I think from an educator's perspective, that's very important anytime we get into new technology, like a lot of the AI generative programming that we see. It's a great tool. However, just a couple of thoughts. So at a conference a couple of years ago where a teacher found this great app and she downloaded it and she was using it in her class, and it was sharing student work and the parents could see it and the kids could see it. Everybody loved it. And then all of a sudden, the parents started getting solicitations from an educational product company about how they could buy these products that would help them educate their kids at home. And they couldn't figure out how the parents all of a sudden were getting these solicitations. It turned out that when the teacher downloaded this app, which was not an approved app by the board, that the metadata, and I don't know that, I hope I'm using the right term, but whatever underlying data was there was being used to contact the parents and try to sell them stuff. There were some unpleasant conversations that classroom teacher had to have with administration. When we start to look at some of the products that are out there that are all really interesting technological tools, understand that you should make sure that it is approved by your Board of Education. The board approves curriculum, and you should not be using curriculum that's not approved by the board. So to stay out of trouble for whatever products you may be using, make sure you have Board of Education approval, at least approval of your immediate supervisor when you start to use some of these items. When you read the disclaimers, and Karen talked about some of the disclaimers, they will often tell you that they're going to share your data with other people. Is that something that your board is comfortable with? Probably not. Is that something that you should make sure you have approval for before you use that stuff? Absolutely. We talked about the writing of evaluations and recommendations. Let's talk about recommendations. It's kind of an interesting question. Generally, that's not part of your job description as an educator to write recommendations. And typically when there are labor issues in the schools, one of the things that many educators stop doing is writing recommendations for college because it's not part of their job. They're going to work to the contract. So my concern there is to get consent. Karen talked about consent. Very important to have consent from the parent to share this information, to use this information. That will help protect you, because guess what? If you're writing a recommendation and it's not something that is required of you as part of your job, you might not have the backing of your district if there's some legal consequences, because it's not something arising out of your duties as an educator. It's something above and outside that you're doing that's nice, but it may not be part of your contract. So very important to take a look at that and be careful. You often see in some of these products that are out there, there's a nice little item to click on that says free for educators, and you bring it down and you get an opportunity to use it. My concern is the data and what they're going to do with the data when you have it. We've heard about some of the issues with the generative items and how that all works and how they put these wonderful items together and possible biases. Also, I've heard about educators, administrators who are using their AI generator materials to help write evaluations of staff, make their job a little easier. They can write better evaluations and put the data in, get a better product out. Well, understand there may be labor relations concerns there, because while the board can pick the product, the document that's being used, procedures are negotiable. So how this is used, when it is used, what it may be used by, I think your local labor unions are going to be involved in negotiating over those items. So there's a lot going on out there. I think very important to check what comes out of this, how you work with it. The disclaimers that you see from the companies, they basically say, you got to make sure you check all this stuff, and we're not guaranteeing that it's fully accurate. So it's a really challenging time, but from a cautionary perspective for our educators in the audience, and we have a lot of them today, be careful out there, make sure you have board approval. And I'll share one other board curriculum piece. I live in Woodbridge. We had a situation a few years ago with one of our teachers in town, who actually was a classmate of my son's when he was in high school. He was a Holocaust denier. He taught that in the social studies class at the high school that the Holocaust didn't exist. And he directed his students to various sites online, and they were doing analyses and they were writing papers and doing all kinds of stuff. And from a kind of challenging perspective, the vice principal signed off on his lesson plans. That wasn't a good thing. But all of a sudden, Channel 11 out of New York showed up at the principal's office wanting to talk about what was happening with this particular teacher. That wasn't a good day at the high school for the administrators or anything else. And ultimately, that person lost his job because he was using curriculum that had not been approved by the board. So I go back to the fact that under 18833-1, the board approves all curriculum, and that includes products that you use. So make sure when you're getting into AI that you're using something that is approved by the board. So Kim, I think I took that a little bit further than maybe you wanted, but I think the cautionary note here is very important. So I hope that was okay.
No, I wanted to, because I think that this is relating to what our audience needs to hear. They need to understand that there are these risks for some of these apps that they're using with their students as part of their job. So Mike, I'll let you continue. I know we have a pretty big list to go through, and you're going to follow up on some of the administrative processes that schools go through with regard to HIB investigations and some of the updates in the law.
So I'm going to take about 15 minutes, but I would again go back to our educators here. Check your policies if your board has one. Some are still trying to write them. I don't think Strauss Esme or the School Boards Association have really wrapped their hands around AI policies. Check your policies, follow your policies, and get approval from your supervisors and hopefully the board on using this. When we came back to do this program and came back after since 2000 with 2021, 2022, Kim asked me to talk about what's new, what's changed. And I think if we talk about cyberbullying in the schools, again, my disclaimer, this is not legal advice. I'm giving you legal information. We don't have an attorney-client relationship, but if you want to use this in your district, as long as you don't charge anybody for it, legal one is fine with you doing that. We're going to cover the items that you see here. I think it's important to go over them, including case law and what's new in the law. a reminder and a definition for those who are not educators, and even some of you who are, understand that when we talk about bullying, harassment, intimidation, what people generically think is harassment, intimidation, and bullying, New Jersey has in the schools a very unique, strict definition. And so while a lot of behavior may be bad behavior and should be addressed through the code of conduct, it may not turn out to be HIB. So what do we need to have HIB in a New Jersey school? It can be gestures, written, verbal, or physical acts, and electronic communication. So cyberbullying was added about 2 years into the anti-bullying law. Can be a single or series of incidents on school property, school function, or school bus, or off school grounds. So we can get to that. The gesture has to be motivated by a perceived characteristic. If there's no perceived characteristic, as bad as the behavior might be, it's not bullying. So what are the characteristics? And the statute lists a lot of what you see as a protected class list that you see here, or anything else, any other distinguishing characteristic. We've seen head lice, we've seen ability to play sports, we've seen a variety of different characteristics, not of the protected class status that you see here, that have been deemed to generate HIB. In the past year, last year, about 50% of the distinguishing characteristics, a little over 50%, were protected class. That's higher than it's been in most years. Usually the other category is about 50%. Now, and along with having this characteristic, it has to substantially disrupt or interfere with the orderly operation of the schools or right of other students. If there's no disruption, there's no HIB. There may be inappropriate language or may be bad behavior, but it doesn't hit the HIB definition. And along with that, it either has to have the effect to create reasonable fear of physical, emotional harm to the student or damage to property, insult or demean any student or group of students, create a hostile educational environment. So there's a lot of boxes to check to make sure that you get through the HIB definition. Now, the administrative code in its recent amendments in the HIB law has a couple of pieces of information about the definition. A board can have an HIB definition that is more expansive in terms of what is bad behavior than what the law requires. I don't know of anybody who does. It can't be less than what the law requires, but you could do more. You could expand this to more bad behavior if a local district wanted to, and that would be adopted by board policy at the Board of Education level. Also included in the code provision is that the policy should include a statement that bullying is unwanted aggressive behavior that may involve a real or perceived power imbalance. If you've worked in the education community for a long time, or at least before the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act became law, we know that power imbalance was a big factor in looking at bullying. That language did not make its way into the definition in the statute. It has made its way into the code, but I think you still go back to definition and statute. I have a piece here with respect to investigation process. In the interest of time,
before you get into that, there was a question real quick that you just, I think, does the statute apply to parochial schools, private schools, and what have you?
It does not apply to parochial or private schools, although they are encouraged to adopt the parameters of the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The investigation process, in the interest of time, because I think we're already almost about 11:05, I'm going to really quickly go through this, but those who are educators kind of know the process, and this will help those who aren't. When a school employee or contracted service provider, that could be your cafeteria workers, your bus drivers who you contract out for, if you witness or get reliable information regarding an act of HIB, must report it verbally on the same day to the principal, follow it up in writing within 2 days. If a member of a Board of Education, a student or volunteer has witnessed or reliable information, they are to give that to the appropriate school official. For the board members, usually the superintendent. For others, it perhaps would be the building principal. If there's no time frame for the student or parent, similar to that of educators. Now, if HIB is alleged, there are provisions in the law that allow for districts to, through policy, come up with a preliminary determination by the principal You only do that if you have included in your policy. And if the principal looks at the data and indicates that this is not HIB, no matter how we look at it, they can make that determination and not send it to the anti-bullying specialist for consultation. That depends on your local board policy. If that decision is made, that is appealable to the board by the parent or guardian. So the principal initiates the investigation within 1 day by handing it off to the anti-bullying specialist. That specialist does the investigation, has 10 school days within which to complete it, sends it over to the superintendent within 2 days of completion of the investigation. That report can be amended down the road if you get more data. The superintendent can decide, along with what happened at the building level, excuse me, building level by the principal, to provide additional intervention services, training, counseling, discipline, whatever is necessary. That then goes to the board at the next board meeting. That report goes in terms of what services were provided, training established, discipline imposed, etc. And it gets to the next board meeting. Now, the parents or guardians are notified within 5 school days of the report to the board of the nature of the investigation, whether evidence of HIB was found and whether discipline was imposed. And then it goes to the board. The parents can request a hearing before the board within 60 calendar days. That has to be held within 10 calendar days of receipt. It's done in executive session to protect the privacy interests of those involved. And ultimately, the board is going to make a decision to affirm, reject, or modify the superintendent's decision. That matter can then be appealed to the Commissioner of Ed within 90 days. If this is a protected class individual, there's the possibility of a appeal to the Division of Civil Rights. And if it's a special education student, this could create some issues with respect to the IEP, with respect to behavioral intervention plans, things of that nature on either side of that ledger for the special ed student, and there could be a due process appeal. Before we move to the next one, Kim, any questions in the chat about process?
Yeah. So if a parent claims their child is being bullied, does that automatically merit an HIB? This person works in an elementary school, and this happens a lot when kids complain to a parent that, you know, the playing at recess is unfair and quote, that's bullying.
Well, if the parent then gives that information to a school official, that is then going to go to the principal. And the principal will then, if they have the preliminary determination model, can make a preliminary determination as to whether this is HIB. If they don't have that modeling policy, it gets investigated and it goes to the anti-bullying specialist who then does an investigation.
Can I just remind everybody to mute themselves, please? Please mute yourself. Thank you.
So the simple answer is yes.
Yes. So if you hear the word bullying, which was my understanding as an attorney, then they have to open an investigation. Is that correct?
Yes. And if you were including opening the investigation as the possibility of the principal preliminary determination, yes. The principal's going to get it, and either if they have the ability within board policy to do that, look at the preliminary determination, or may just forward it directly to the anti-bullying specialist.
Another question. Do parents have to be allowed into HIB interviews with the accused, the witnesses, or the victim? I mean, this isn't a criminal process, so do parents get to be involved in that?
They do not get to be involved at that level. Where their opportunity will come into play is when they get information and perhaps ask for a hearing before the board, and they can present that to the board. It's not unlike any other disciplinary issue in the school. Every time there's a disciplinary issue regarding a particular student, the parent doesn't have to be called in before the principal or vice principal can talk with the student. So no, there's no requirement that the parent be in on all of that investigation. Parents have to be advised that this is going on and advised in the beginning, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the new law and what is involved there. But yes, parents are aware it's going on, and then they get the information after that matter is submitted to the board as far as whether HIB was found, whether discipline was imposed, whether any counseling or anything like that occurred.
And so, Mike, one of the other things, I'm sorry, there's just a lot of questions related to what you're saying. We've, someone says, and this kind of relates with what I do, we've had incidents of female students' nude photos being shared around by other female students as retaliation for drama. We haven't been able to find HIBs founded because there's no motivating characteristic, but this behavior is egregious. Is there anything that the teacher or the school can do to help with this?
help in the way of working with the parent, or I'm not
I guess
sure?
anything. I mean, because if it's not a motivating characteristic and then there's no bullying associated
Okay.
with it, I mean,
Okay.
you know, I would say I would refer them to the police at that point. That would be what
Well,
I say, criminal defense lawyer.
well, that too, but I would also say is just because it's not HIV doesn't mean it's not bad behavior, and doesn't mean it's not something you can act on under the code of conduct,
Okay.
or just as
Gotcha.
treated as a regular disciplinary type matter. And then we're going to go to board policy and the code of conduct for students, and there's likely to be something within that context that administrators can hang their hat on in terms of working with the parent. Now, the question that's going to come up is this on school ground? Has it made its way into the school? Has it created a disruption? And if it's created disruption, you've got a better chance of prevailing on intervention and working in that situation than if there's no evidence that it's been brought into the school. I think these days, with everybody's cell phones and ability to communicate, everything gets into the school. So
Right.
you've got a pretty good chance of working through that.
And we do have case updates about that kind of thing too, but I'll let
Yeah.
you continue. Thank you.
Okay. And I would say, to the extent that there is you probably want to get the counselors involved. Depending on the nature of the behaviors, you may need to talk to school psychologists in terms of some of the implications for students on either end of that, because it all becomes part of a general investigation. Again, just because it's not HIV doesn't mean it's not bad behavior. It doesn't mean code of conduct can't kick in.
I wish we had more time, Mike, because we're already getting past your time, and I know you had a lot more to share about
All
what
right.
we're talking about.
Can I get 5 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. The new law that came into effect, that had been Mallory's law. Key piece here is that it does provide for civil liability of parents of minors adjudicated delinquent for cyber harassment or harassment. If there's a crime of cyber harassment, the options in municipal court can include ordering the minor along with a parent to attend a class or training. A parent of a minor under 16 who's delinquent, fails to abide by the court order offense, can be fined. And if the parent is found to have demonstrated willful or wanton disregard in the exercise of the supervision or control of the minor, when there's cyber harassment from the 2C criminal end, they can be liable in civil action. So you can have attorney's fees and damages in lawsuits there. What the new law included was the use of preliminary determination. If you're doing that, there should be a report to the superintendent and to the board when that occurs. There's consequences for remedial actions for first acts, second acts, and most significantly, third and subsequent acts, the development of an individual student intervention plan, which will be approved by the superintendent of schools, including remedial actions, behavioral intervention services, and may require the student to accompany the parent and guardian to a training program. So dealing with the adjudicated bully as well. There's communications with law enforcement pursuant to the model agreement. Under the new law, the principal keeps a written record of the time, date, and matter of notification to the parents. We saw that in the beginning. That's now in the law. All written reports are on documents created by the Department of Ed. They are all the same document. Every district uses the same ones, and they are submitted by the principal to the superintendent. If the preliminary determination is made, you still do that. Redacted copies of the form can be shared with the board. If there's a hearing requested, there's an ability for anonymous reporting. The principal is going to report to the superintendent if a preliminary determination is made. If the superintendent thinks it shouldn't have been and they should investigate it, superintendent can kick it back and have that investigation be done. There's the policy has to have on your homepage the guidance document from DOE that is still not been updated. There is now a school climate state coordinator established who has a lot of duties to do. Jill Couple is the person in the position. All her communications are deemed confidential. There were broadcast emails regarding the model policy. It's online, 32 pages. There are new forms, the HIB 338 form, one for personnel, one for family and caregivers. They were changed this year to eliminate the possibility of staff members reporting anonymously, and they're now available in several languages. There's a task force report that Stuart's going to talk about. These are the areas in which the task force made recommendations, specifically made recommendations on social media, but in the interest of time, it's on your documentation. You can take a look at that. These are recommendations. This is not the law. It depends on what the legislature and state board does in that area. And I want to touch on just a couple of cases with HIB so you kind of get a sense how this works. There's a case out of Jefferson Township, and it was an appellate division decision on this back in 2020. This dealt with 5th grade females who had extraordinarily offensive and vile language back and forth among each other. The egregious words, sexual references, use of the N-words. The girls said, not a big deal. We talk about this way all the time. It's pranking. So there was no showing of disruption or interference with any of the students' rights or academic programs. Well, the parents were outraged, and they basically said, anytime the N-word is used, that should be HIB. And the girls consistently, including the daughter of the parents who brought this case forward, said, didn't really bother me. Just we talk this way all the time. So with no evidence that there was interference with the ability to safely or effectively learn, no demonstration that it substantially disrupted, no HIB. And the appellate division, in fact, said, and you can see the bold language here, if we were to adopt this position that the single use of a racial slur is a per se violation of the act, we would be legislating. And that's not what the law says, and we're not going to do that in this particular circumstance. The RH case, and Kim, you asked me to talk about this one. This is out of Sayreville. This is still going at a different level, though. There were 2 HIB determinations here. One, the board determined that student had committed an act of HIB when she created a social media post depicting a friend with a mud mask on her face with the caption, when he says he's only into black girls. There was a 1-day suspension imposed, and she was removed from student council. The board also determined that she had not been the victim of HIB after incidents in which she alleged she had been called a racist by other students at school, and there was also a statement posed to her whether she, quote, liked chocolate, unquote. And the ALJ here affirmed both decisions. The commissioner looked at this, going through the analysis, said her conduct in creating that social media post, any reasonable person, and that's the standard, would know this has the effect of insulting and demeaning African-American students. It also created a substantial disruption. The building principal talked about having to staff the cafeteria because of concerns that were going on. They looked at if you remember this U.S. Supreme Court case about the cheerleaders out in Pennsylvania and language off campus in there, they found that this caused a substantial disruption, that being the commissioner, and that the potential for altercations were such the principal had to monitor lunch hour for weeks. So they found substantial disruption. They found it interfered with student operations. They found it was on a platform that came into the school. So they found that to be HIB. Her claim that she was bullied, no evidence that it substantially disrupted the school or her rights. So no bullying as to her, bullying as to the social media post that she used, and the board was given deference. Now, that being said, there is now a case in federal court where the student who was the adjudicated bully who left school, their parents brought a lawsuit against the district saying this was discipline that they shouldn't have taken. It violated her First Amendment rights. And in fact, the law and the policies were unconstitutionally vague. The complaints, as you see listed there, the vagueness got dismissed. The law is fine. The policy was fine, not impermissibly vague. However, the First Amendment piece stayed, and that went forward. Now, they said, looking at the Tinker versus Des Moines standard, this may not have met the standard for regulation of student speech off campus. The question here at the federal level, even though the commissioner determined at the local level and for HIB purposes there was substantial disruption, apparently that hadn't been pleaded sufficiently here, and this got kicked back for a determination as to whether or not it was a substantial disruption which would allow regulation of speech. So stay tuned on that one.
All right, I gotta wrap you up because
okay.
we only have till 11:30, but I have been given permission to go over. I just don't know if our audience will be able to do that. So I know that there's a lot of information here. Everybody is going to get a copy of the PowerPoint. Mike, thank you so much. And we're going to take what you've just said now, and we're going to transfer into what Dr. Stuart Green, thank you, what Dr. Stuart Green talks about, because Mike really talks about it from the school standpoint, and Stuart, you know, you talk about it from from the other side and about how some of these issues really work in our state. And you've been very involved in the Anti-Bullying Commission report. Can you just first talk to us about some of what happened? Because a lot of what Mike just talked about with some of these cases is really why the commission came up with this report and its response to some of these cases. So if you don't mind, from a systems perspective, you've talked about why a major cause of most cyberbullying, including sexting, is the responsibility and management of the inadequacies of social media companies. I know you've talked about that. And sometimes you talk about, I think, and I'll let you talk really, about why this is so detrimental to our kids. Can you go into that a little bit?
Before I even try to respond to that, I think there's 8 minutes left, unless we
And
go
we are
over.
going to be able to go over if you're available to stay to go over, Dr. Green.
I'm available, but just to try and honor for those committed to 11:30, the 8-minute thing, I just want to say first that whenever I'm in a conference with Michael, who I always try to involve in every conference I organize, I'm always tempted to cede whatever time I have to him because he does such a great job with these issues. And along the same lines, I was so impressed with Felicia's presentation, including on the kinds of bullying issues and data I usually talk about, and with boy, I'm getting old. I'm blocked on a name. Kim. Karen did such a great job with her presentation, and I learned a lot from all of that. So I just want to make a couple of points that might not have been emphasized enough, and then in maybe the minute or a couple remaining, I can talk about the task force, which from my point of view did very underwhelming work, despite the fact that I was part of it. I just want to emphasize a couple of points, maybe somewhat randomly. One is that almost all of the electronic forms of bullying, new ones, the previous ones, almost all those electronic forms are occurring between kids who know each other from the same schools and towns and communities. In other words, and Felicia sort of presented some data on this, almost all the electronic forms of bullying are related to or express themselves before or after in-person bullying. There is some that's independent of that, but in other words, where the bullying is only electronic, but that's virtually always between kids who know each other from the same schools. All of this behavior is happening between students, typically who attend the same schools or are in the same district. And that's why it's appropriate to expect schools to deal with all of this. I mean, in addition to where it's appropriate, law enforcement involvement and per the memorandum and so forth. So that's one point. The other point I want to make is a point that Mike made. I'll just emphasize it, which is the issue of what Mike called bad behavior. The fact is that schools, and I'm saying this based on best practices in education, not especially the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, but the appropriate ideal for schools is to understand the social and emotional status and peer relations, quality of, presence of, in all the kids in the school. And there's enough adults in the school. I'm not saying the principal has to be aware of that in regard to 400 or 800 kids, but there's enough adults in every school for there to be an adult or two, or sometimes more, who are aware of the social and emotional status and functioning and peer relations of every kid in that school, but especially and most importantly, if you're going to only do that for part of your student population, for the kids that you know are going to be most vulnerable. I do work with lawyers on bullying cases brought by families. And you have cases where there are, 4 or 5 Muslim kids in a school where nobody else is Muslim. Those kids are going to be vulnerable for targeting, and you know it. We also have great data to show which student subpopulations are most targeted for bullying. and it's going to be kids who are gender diverse, kids with special needs, kids with any difference in appearance, overweight, obesity, even though that's practically a demographic norm any minute now in the youth population. These are kids who are most likely to be targeted. And I'll use this point to make another point. The primary cause of bullying is not the individual psychopathology of kids who bully. It's not bad families, bad kids, or bad communities. The cause of almost all bullying is the culture and climate of schools. The culture of a school is the way we do things here, how the school is run, the modeling provided by adults in the school, including in their relationships with each other. And out of that culture grows the climate of the school climate, which is the way the place feels to the people in it, even the people who visit it. I've done projects with kids from the LGBTQ community who can visit a school and in 5 or 10 minutes in the entryway by the office or walking through the halls can see whether the school's culture is adequately supportive of LGBT or gender diverse kids based on signage, based on, safe space stickers, based on, just a bunch of things, the gestalt of the school. It's school culture and climate, the way schools are run, the behavior of the adults who lead and staff schools that primarily causes bullying, and changes and strengthening of that culture and climate are capable of preventing most bullying, or ensuring that when bullying does occur, some always will anyway, that it's adequately addressed and doesn't continue. I wanted to make that point. I'm making these points sort of randomly in response to talks and based on notes I have, and
but we appreciate that. Yeah, no, we appreciate that.
I just want to go on for a minute,
Please.
which is Mallory's law, which Mike referred to. Understandable, of course, and did some good things, especially the creation of the state school climate coordinator position, though not independently funded, not staffed, and still a year or more in, not making a huge impact. But I'm hopeful about that, and I think it's good that the position was created, and Jill's a fine person. The point is, Mallory's law did a bad thing, in my view, one thing, which is it creates fines and penalties for parents who are not the primary cause of bullying, and no penalties or sanctions or otherwise of any kind for schools, where the culture and climate of the school, primarily determined by the leaders of the school and the staffing, that's what creates culture and climate. So there's penalties for parents now, but no penalties or sanctions for schools. So there is that.
How about the fact that we talked about, death of Next Benedict and Jack Reed, some of those cases we discussed, because when you talk about penalties of school, they really have to be involved now as a result of some of these cases. Isn't that true?
The Jack Reed case is extremely atypical and exceptional, because after that child's death, the school remarkably, very unusually, decided to work with the parents without waiting for a lawsuit, particularly, or anything else. Maybe there was the beginning of that, and decided to cooperate with what is now the Jack Reed Foundation that the parents started. So that's the Lawrenceville thing. There was no requirement, unusual requirement for Lawrenceville to do that. And you mentioned Jack Reed, you mentioned some other case.
Next Benedict, yeah.
The Next Benedict case, there's no, I'm not sure what you're referring to. There's no requirement or Oklahoma process that has, schools doing something new. There is some legislative, effort there to increase penalties of some kind when bullying occurs. I haven't read that carefully, but these are unusual situations. We
But
don't have,
is there legislation coming out, Stuart, that looks at some of these cases now and they're trying to pass?
I'll just
Or we don't have
mention that.
anything yet? Yeah.
No, and I'll just mention that from my point of view, I had high hopes for this task force, high hopes that we were going to do the things that need to be done, which is in particular put language into the law that just like the other legislation referred to in the talks that creates civil suit pathways for parents and families when schools don't adequately prevent and address bullying. The task force completely failed to do that. I'll jump to social media for a second. From my point of view, advocates' point of view, social media companies, along with schools, but social media companies are completely irresponsible and responsible for the problems that youth are having. I think everyone should read Jonathan Haidt's book or look at his talks on YouTube. There's an interview with Dr. Mike you can access. And I totally agree with his recommendation, which is Haidt's recommendation, which is that schools ban have kids not have cell phones at all, smartphones at all during school hours. I think that's absolutely necessary. There is a school, I forget which, that did that with those electronic bags that students put their phones into. But that should be a universal practice, and it would help a lot. But meanwhile, beyond that and after school hours, the social media companies are completely irresponsible for what goes on with these electronic harms to students. So we haven't done anything about that yet. And I'm just going to check for a second on my notes. Oh, back to the bad behavior point. I want to make that. If schools really should be responsible for understanding, and that's what's involved, it's understanding. The law uses terms like investigate as if it was a law and order process. It's not. The educational responsibility is to understand the social relations and functioning and status of kids, especially those most vulnerable, and to understand that and to address it. And after this conference ends, everybody registered is going to get a copy of a 5-page bullet-pointed guideline from our coalition that describes the steps that schools ought to be taking to prevent and address bullying. And whether it's bullying or whether it's conflict, schools are obligated to address those things. By the way, bullying is the most common form of peer violence by far. Conflict is actually more specialized. A thing is only conflict if it's an incident or a few incidents occurring between students of roughly equal social or physical power. And in most issues of conflict, partly almost what defines it, it isn't just one person always getting hurt. And it isn't the most vulnerable person, participant getting hurt. It isn't always a female, a girl getting hurt by a boy, and it's almost never one boy. There are almost always other kids involved, either supporting or participating. Of course, that by definition would become bullying. And yet, on the information line I run, which gets calls almost every day from parents throughout the state, a common complaint I get is that the school has defined something as conflict, when really, based on the parent's description, it's bullying. And by the way, I'll make a point about the preliminary determination, or what I call administrative discretion piece, that was put back into play by a previous commission that I disagreed with tons. The whole reason we created this law, and I participated in the creation of this law, the whole reason we created this law, or maybe not the whole reason, that's an exaggeration, but a reason was administrator discretion or preliminary determination of what was or wasn't bullying wasn't getting the job done. one point of the law was to remove that kind of discretion or preliminary determination and make sure that schools paid attention to the harm that these kids were suffering. So a previous task force went and brought the issue back, and now it's part of practice for there to be preliminary determination. And a lot of those preliminary determinations, the ones I hear about, are frankly wrong, where something's preliminarily determined to be conflict, when based on the description of it, it's clearly bullying. But aside from, I'll finish with one more point about this. Aside from the legal required process for investigating the 10 days and all that, it's broad. School responsibility is broader than that. It's to understand what's been happening to a child who's been getting hurt in their care as a student, and to take steps to address it and prevent that harm from continuing, whether it's bullying or whether it's a code of conduct, conflict, bad behavior, whatever it is. Schools are responsible for addressing that harm and getting that harm to stop.
Okay, so on that note, though,
there's been there. Go ahead.
No. There's a question on that note, and I just want, maybe we can wrap things up with this, because I know you do have some significant opinions about this. But one person says they're wondering if anyone will touch on the agreement between police and schools about when to report what about sexting and when schools can handle it themselves. And I know you and I have had talks about this was in our preparation time. About, when do police get involved? When should the schools get the police involved?
I think Mike and Felicia and other folks should be the more appropriate folks to answer that. I'll just make a general comment, and then hopefully Mike and the others can take over. I'll just say that the tension that you have with law enforcement involvement is the concern about the school to prison pipeline, especially almost only as it affects kids of color. Sometimes actually kids with a pervasive developmental disorder or autism. When you get law enforcement involved in educational settings, a whole bunch of different things happen that are not part of common educational practice. For one thing, if it's a law enforcement involved situation, you have to have a parent present when even an educator is sort of talking to a kid about incidents like that, although, again, not my core expertise. Mike can comment further. So that's the concern about the school to prison pipeline. But certainly there are things that ought to be reported to law enforcement. I got a call yesterday, yesterday or this morning from a parent whose granddaughter was assaulted repeatedly over the course of the past year by a boy with supporters, of course, in the school. Assaulted, thrown on top of a car or something like that, and hurt. Law enforcement has a role to play for sure, and schools ought to be reporting certain things. I'll let Mike take the rest of that. He's much more expert on these issues than I am.
Thanks, Stuart.
Start from the premise that in 2019, there were changes to the model agreement, and there were just changes again this December. But the essence was to reduce the amount of items that were reported to law enforcement to try and get away from the school to prison pipeline. So the requirement to report cyber harassment or cyberbullying is very limited, and only when it reaches the level of a crime. And then you can look at the model agreement between law enforcement and your school and see what in fact they require be reported. Sexting, unless there are pretty explicit issues happening in the school and sexual activity events, there has to be essentially, they describe the term penetration in the agreement. If it's not that, then there's no requirement to report. And so there's very limited requirements of reporting cyberbullying, sexting, things of that nature. However, some individual police agencies will work with their local boards of education and say, yeah, but send us other information as well. That's, so there's this agreement locally that may be more expansive. The other piece in the law is that, and it's in the model agreement and it's also in the code, is that if there's a bias related act That doesn't necessarily mean bullying, but a bias-related act, and that could be bullying, meaning bullying involving a protected class, that is to be reported to law enforcement. We get maybe 15, 20% every year of those actual adjudicated HIB issues involving protected class individuals that actually get reported to law enforcement. Now, what they do with it is a whole nother question. But the law requires that any bias-related act, adjudicated bias-related act, should be reported to law enforcement. What we see year after year is that those numbers are not anywhere near what is supposed to be reported. So that reporting isn't done.
Mike, I'll interrupt just to add a
No,
point to
please.
that. When I get calls in which clearly the LAD, Law Against Discrimination, the Division on Civil Rights Issues are involved, in my experience on this line for the past 20 years, parents of kids involved in incidents like that are almost never told by school officials that the Division on Civil Rights exists, that what's happened to their child may have to do with the law against discrimination, that there are 50 investigators like cops at the division offices and a ton of lawyers, and the parent has the right to call them and at least get the supportive experience of being able to talk about what's happened to somebody deeply interested. So I'll just add that point to your 15% point that you made or whatever.
It's really fascinating the amount that does not get reported, and I understand. Some folks don't want what would be perceived by some to be a negative mark against them for having reported that. Sometimes that is politically discouraged within the school environment, but the law does require that that you report those particular offenses.
I just
So
want to
Mike,
put in.
one thing
Go
I
ahead,
gotta
Mike.
ask, because this is like something, and so on the sexting, you're basically saying that the agreement basically says that if they send a nude photo of themselves to somebody else who's underage, and that's distribution of child pornography, that the police do not get called in that incident. So it would be up to me as a parent, if that happened to my daughter, to call the police myself, even though it happens on school property.
What I would say, the sexting only triggers a mandatory reporting obligation if it's conduct that is covered by some of the other issues talked about in there in terms of sexual penetration or criminal sexual contact on school grounds or against a student. So that doesn't mean you don't report it. What I have to say is that it's not a mandatorily required report under the model agreement. So your local law enforcement people, I mean, I would, if I were sitting in that chair and I were in the school setting, I would report that. Now let them do with it what they need to do with it. But that's really up to the local law enforcement people and the local schools to what they do about it.
I just want to add to that when Mallory's law was being drafted, and I participated in those discussions, the original proposal for Mallory's law was that all anti-bullying specialists should be the school resource officer everywhere in the state. In other words, school resource officer, that isn't even an official term. That's just what captains call police officers assigned to schools. And the school resource state organization did not want that role. They did not feel that their school resource officers would be appropriately trained and attitudinally right for taking on that anti-bullying specialist role. So thankfully, that was left out of Mallory's law. But so you can see it's a complicated relationship, which is what Mike is saying.
Yeah. The language in the model agreement basically says, and I'm looking at it right now, schools are therefore encouraged to consult with law enforcement for any incident that may require outside investigation. And that's under the section on reporting of sexting. So contact your local law enforcement, see what they want to know about these circumstances, see what they want you to report.
Right. And I'll just end with one final point, and I can completely stop, which is 20 plus years ago, when we started addressing these issues in more modern terms, the big hope and I think the big success of the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, and even in a broad sense of the three commissions and whatever, has been to sort of heighten awareness of the importance of bullying and to raise parent and community expectations for this issue to be addressed. And I consider this conference and Felicia's great work and, you know, the great knowledge of everybody participating today to be a sign of that having happened. I think the awareness level, the knowledge level is just awesome at this point, and we just need more. We need more, but I'm happy with this and thrilled by the work and, you know, Felicia's work and everybody's work.
I think that that is the perfect way to end, Stuart, on those last words that you just made. And I got to tell you, I've already spoken to the staff at the Bar Foundation while we're talking, from Kate Coscarelli, and I said, we need to do this again. So we're going to do a follow-up again, because there were so many good questions that I couldn't even get to that people were posting while everybody was talking. So Felicia, thank you for the books and for all the information. Karen, it was wonderful. You had such great knowledge. Mike, could always ask you even more questions because I always love talking about it. And you too, Dr. Green, always a pleasure to work with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And this is Kate
Thanks for the
Coscarelli from the State Bar. I just want to say thank you again to everyone who was able to take part today. A shameless pitch. Please do visit our website. There's lots of great resources. It's NJSBF.org. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. We will be sharing with everyone a recording, the presentations, the checklists, and resources that were mentioned with everyone who registered. So whether they attended or not, we're going to spread this important information far and wide. Thank you to everyone for making this a part of your day.